before we begin this incredible tale of honor and consequence, please hit that like button if you enjoy epic Viking stories. Subscribe to our channel for more emotional historical narratives, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable story. The morning mist clung to the rocky shores of the northern settlement like the breath of ancient spirits, and young Arvel could taste the salt and iron in the air as he made his way through the pine forest that bordered his clan's territory. At 19 winters old, he had already proven himself in 3 raids across the western seas, his broad shoulders carrying the confidence of a warrior who had faced both storm and steel. Yet today, something felt different about the familiar paths he walked. The settlement of Ironhold sat nestled between towering cliffs and protected bay, its long houses built from the sturdy oak that grew thick in these lands. Smoke rose from morning cooking fires, and the sound of axes splitting would echo to the crisp air. Children played between the buildings while their mothers tended to daily tasks, and the older warriors sat outside the great hall, sharing stories of their younger days. It was a scene Arvold had known since childhood, peaceful and predictable. But peace, as his father often reminded him, was a luxury that required constant vigilance to maintain. The first sign of trouble came as a deep rumble that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Arvold paused on a forest path, his hand instinctively moving to the handle of his battle axe. The sound came again, longer this time, accompanied by what sounded like labored breathing. Following the noise of the dense undergrowth, he pushed aside low-hanging branches and stepped into a small clearing where ancient stones formed a rough circle. There, collapsed among the weathered rocks, lay a creature that should have existed only in the songs of the skalds. The dragon was magnificent even in its wounded state. Its scales shimmered with deep emerald hues that caught and reflected the filtered sunlight, and despite its obvious pain, there was an intelligence in its golden eyes that spoke of wisdom far beyond that of any mortal creature. One of its great wings lay twisted at an unnatural angle, and dark blood seeped from several wounds along its flanks. The beast's breathing was shallow and labored, each exhale creating small puffs of steam in the cool morning air. Arvold stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, his warriors training warring with a sense of wonder. Dragons were creatures of legend, spoken of in hushed tones around winter fires. Some tales painted them as destroyers, burning settlements and carrying off livestock. Others described them as ancient guardians of hidden treasures, beings of immense power and cunning. But here before him lay neither destroyer nor guardian, only a wounded creature in desperate need of aid. The dragon's gray head turned toward him, and their eyes met across the clearing. There was no hostility in that golden gaze, only pain and a strange sort of resignation. The creature made a sound, almost like a sigh, and lowered its massive head to rest among the fallen leaves. "Easy there, great one," Arvold said softly, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. He took a tentative step forward, then another, his axe remaining at his belt. "I mean you no harm." The dragon watched him approach, but made no move to defend itself. Up close, Arvold could see that the wounds were serious, deep gashes that spoke of fierce battle with something equally formidable. The broken wing would need careful tending if it was ever to heal properly, and the creature was clearly weak from loss of blood. Arvold knelt beside the great beast, his hands hovering uncertainly over the injured wing. He had some skill with healing. All warriors learned basic field medicine to tend their brothers in battle, but this was far beyond anything he had encountered. Still, the principles remained the same. Stop the bleeding, clean the wounds, set any broken bones. "This is going to hurt," he warned, though he doubted the creature understood his words. To his surprise, the dragon made a sound that might have been agreement, and its eyes seemed to convey understanding. Working carefully, Arvold cleaned the wounds with water from his drinking horn, using strips torn from his own cloak to bind the deeper cuts. The dragon remained perfectly still throughout the process, occasionally letting out a low rumble that might have been either pain or gratitude. When it came time to tend the broken wing, Arvold found straight branches to serve as splints and used more of his cloak to secure them in place. The work took the better part of the morning, and by the time he finished, both he and the dragon were exhausted. Arvold sat back against one of the ancient stones, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool air. The dragon's breathing had improved somewhat, and its eyes seemed clearer, more alert. "There," Arvold said, speaking as much to himself as to his unlikely patient. That should help you heal. The wing will take time, but dragons are said to be hardy creatures. As if in response, the dragon lifted its great head and fixed him with that penetrating golden stare. Then, to Arvold's amazement, the creature began to speak, not in the common tongue of men, but in sounds and tones that somehow conveyed meaning directly to his mind. Why? The word formed itself in Arvold's thoughts, heavy with genuine curiosity. Why show mercy to one who could destroy your people? The question caught Arvold off guard. He considered it carefully, knowing somehow that his answer mattered more than he could understand. Because, he said finally, you needed help and I could give it. My people value honor above all else, and there is no honor in leaving a wounded creature to suffer, regardless of what that creature might be capable of when healthy. The dragon was silent for a long moment, its gaze never leaving Arvold's face. When it spoke again, the mental voice carried notes of something like approval. Honor. Yes, your kind speaks often of this concept, though few truly understand its weight. You have shown true honor today, young warrior. This debt will not be forgotten. There is no debt, Arvold replied, though he felt the importance of the moment settling around him like a physical presence. Compassion freely given requires no repayment. Perhaps, but the laws that govern my kind are older than your settlements and deeper than your seas. A life debt freely given creates bonds that transcend the boundaries between species. Remember this day, Arvold of Ironhold, for our paths will cross again. The fact that the dragon knew his name sent a chill down Arvold's spine, but before he could ask how this was possible, exhaustion claimed him. When he woke, the sun was high overhead, and the clearing was empty save for himself and the ancient stones. The only evidence that the encounter had been real was the blood-stained strips of his cloak scattered among the fallen leaves. Arvold made his way back to the settlement in thoughtful silence, the dragon's final words echoing in his mind. As he approached the familiar buildings of Ironhold, he made a decision that would prove fateful in years to come. He would tell no one what had transpired in the clearing. Some experiences were too profound to share, too sacred to risk diminishing through retelling. But deep in his heart, he carried a memory of golden eyes filled with ancient wisdom, and the strange certainty that his act of mercy had set in motion events that would shape not only his own destiny, but that of his entire clan. 7 years had passed since that fateful morning in the stone circle, and Arvold had grown into one of Ironhold's most respected warriors. Now 26 and bearing the scars of countless battles, he served as the settlement's primary scout and defender of the northern approaches. His reputation for both fierce courage and unexpected wisdom had earned him a place among the clan's inner council, despite his relatively young age. The settlement itself had prospered in those years. New longhouses had been built to accommodate families that had grown, and successful trading expeditions had brought prosperity to the community. Children who had been toddlers when Arvold first encountered the dragon were now young warriors themselves, eager to prove their worth in the traditional ways of their people. But prosperity, as Arvold had learned, often attracted those who preferred to take rather than earn. The first signs of trouble came with the autumn rains. Refugees began arriving from settlements to the south, bearing tales of a great war band that swept through the coastal regions like a plague. These raiders were different from the usual opportunistic groups that occasionally troubled the northern clans. They moved with military precision, struck without warning, and left nothing but ash and sorrow in their wake. They called themselves the Iron Wolves, reported Gundar, an old warrior who had escaped the destruction of his own settlement. His weathered face was grim as he addressed the assembled council in Ironhold's great hall. Their leader is a giant of a man who wears black armor and carries a sword longer than most men are tall. They take everything: food, weapons, gold, livestock. Those who resist are cut down without mercy. Arvold leaned forward in his seat, near the great fire. How many? Near 300 by my count, Gundar replied. Maybe more. They move in smaller groups but coordinate their attacks. By the time one settlement realizes they're under assault, 2 others have already fallen. The hall fell silent save for crackle of flames and the distant sound of rain against the wooden walls. 300 warriors was a force larger than any single settlement could hope to face. Even if Ironhold called upon its allies, assembling such numbers would take weeks. Time they likely did not have. They're moving north along the coast, Gundar continued. At their current pace, they'll reach our lands within the fortnight. Eric the Elder, the settlement's chief, stood slowly. His hair had gone completely white in recent years, but his eyes still held a sharpness that had made him a legendary warrior in his youth. Then we have choices to make, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. We can flee inland, abandoning everything our fathers built. We can try to negotiate, though I doubt such men can be reasoned with. Or we can stand and fight, knowing that we face odds that would challenge even the heroes of legend. The debate that followed lasted deep into the night. Some argued for evacuation. Better to live in exile than die defending empty buildings. Others insisted that honor demanded they fight, regardless of the odds. A few suggested attempting to bargain with the Iron Wolves, offering tribute in exchange for being left in peace. Arvold listened to it all, but his mind kept drifting to a memory of golden eyes and ancient wisdom. When Eric finally called for a decision, Arvold found himself standing. We fight, he said simply, not because we believe we can win, but because this is our home. These are our fields, our harbors, our sacred places. If we must die, let it be defending what we hold dear. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. One by one, other warriors stood to join him. By dawn, the decision was unanimous. Ironhold would make it stand. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Every able-bodied person in the settlement contributed to the defense. Weapons were sharpened, arrows were fletched, and barricades were erected at strategic points. Arvold worked tirelessly, organizing patrols and coordinating with a handful of allied warriors who had arrived to help in the defense. But even as they prepared, everyone knew the truth that none dared speak aloud. They were preparing for a noble death, not a victory. The Iron Wolves arrived on a gray morning when fog hung thick over the bay. Arvold was positioned on the northern watchtower when he first spotted their ships emerging from the mist like dark phantoms. There were more vessels than Gundar had described. At least 15 longships, each carrying 20 to 30 warriors. The sight sent a chill through even his experienced heart. The enemy made no attempt at stealth or surprise. They beached their ships openly and formed up on the shore with the confidence of those who had never known defeat. Their leader stood head and shoulders above his men, exactly as described, a giant in black armor who carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room. Arvold climbed down from the watchtower and made his way to the great hall, where the final council of war was already underway. The faces around the fire were grim but determined. These were people who had made their peace with fate and chose to face it with dignity. "They'll attack at dawn," Eric said as Arvold joined the circle. "That's their way. Let us spend the night in fear, then strike when the light is at their backs. Then we'll be ready for them," Arvold replied, though privately he wondered if readiness would matter against such overwhelming odds. That night, as the settlement made its final preparations, Arvold found himself walking once more through the pine forest that bordered Ironhold's territory. His feet seemed to carry him of their own accord toward a destination he hadn't visited in years. The stone circle where he had once aided a wounded dragon. The clearing looked much the same as it had 7 years ago, though the trees had grown taller and the ancient stone seemed more weathered. Arvold sat down in the center of the circle, his back against the largest stone, and stared up at the star-filled sky. "If you're listening, old friend," he said quietly, "tomorrow would be a good day to settle that debt you spoke of." The forest remained silent around him, offering no sign that his words had been heard. Arvold hadn't really expected a response. The dragon had probably forgotten all about their brief encounter, assuming it had even survived its injuries. Still, there was something comforting about being in this place where he had once chosen mercy over caution. He remained in the clearing until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, then made his way back to the settlement. The Iron Wolves were already forming up for their attack, their black banners snapping in the morning breeze. Arvold took his position on the defensive wall, his axe ready, his heart steady despite the impossible odds. The battle began with a thunderous war cry from 400 throats as the Iron Wolves charged up the slope toward Ironhold's defenses. Arrows fell like deadly rain, and the clash of weapons filled the air with a sound like breaking thunder. Despite their courage and preparation, the defenders of Ironhold were slowly being pushed back. The Iron Wolves were not just numerous. They were skilled, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. Arvold fought like a man possessed, his axe singing deadly songs as it cut through enemy ranks. But for every foe he felled, two more seemed to take their place. The defensive wall was breached in 3 places, and Iron Wolf warriors poured through the gaps like a dark tide. It was then, as hope seemed lost and defeat inevitable, that the sky began to darken with something other than storm clouds. The first dragon appeared from the north, its massive form cutting through the morning air with impossible grace. Then another emerged from the east, and a third from the west. Within moments, the sky above Ironhold was filled with dragons, not just one, but an entire flight of the magnificent creatures, their scales gleaming like jewels in the dawn light. The largest dragon, its emerald scales catching the light in familiar patterns, landed directly in the center of the battlefield. Its mental voice, now stronger and clearer than Arvold remembered, spoke not just to him but to every mind present. The debt is remembered. The mercy shown is returned tenfold. What followed was not a battle, but a reckoning. The dragons moved with precise coordination, their great wings creating winds that knocked warriors from their feet, their breath weapons, not fire, but blasts of Arctic air, freezing weapons in enemy hands and turning the morning fog into a blinding barrier that confused and scattered the Iron Wolf formations. But the dragons did not kill. Instead, they demonstrated power so overwhelming that resistance became meaningless. Warriors who had seemed invincible moments before found themselves weaponless and helpless. Their black armor turned brittle by supernatural cold, their formations shattered by winds that struck with surgical precision. The battle, if it could even be called that anymore, lasted less than an hour. When the fog finally cleared, the Iron Wolves found themselves disarmed, defeated, and completely at the mercy of creatures that could have destroyed them with casual ease. The great emerald dragon approached Arvold where he stood among the defenders, its golden eyes holding the same ancient wisdom he remembered from their first meeting. The debt is paid, Arvold of Ironhold, it said, its mental voice warm with something that might have been affection. But know this, mercy creates bonds that transcend single act of repayment. You and yours are under our protection now, as long as honor guides your actions. The dragon's great head turned to regard the defeated Iron Wolves, and his voice carried clearly to every mind present. You who would take by force what others have earned through labor. Hear this and remember, these people are under our protection. Harm them and face the consequences. But more than that, learn from them. There is a better way to live than by the sword alone. With that, the dragons took to the sky once more, their great wings carrying them back to whatever hidden places they called home. But the largest dragon paused before departing, its gaze finding Arvold one last time. Remember, young warrior, mercy freely given creates bonds that last lifetimes. What begins with compassion often ends with wonder. As the dragons disappeared into the distance, leaving behind a settlement full of people who could barely believe what they had witnessed, Arvold felt a profound sense of completion. The debt had indeed been paid, but more than that, a new chapter had begun, one where the relationship between his people and the ancient powers of the world had been forever changed. The Iron Wolves, stripped of their weapons and their arrogance, were given a choice: leave these lands and never return, or remain and learn a different way of living. Many chose to depart, but some, humbled by their encounter with forces beyond their understanding, chose to stay and seek redemption. As for Arvold, he became known throughout the northern settlements not just as a great warrior, but as the dragon friend, the man whose single act of mercy had saved not just his own clan, but had forged an alliance between the world of men and the realm of legends. But even as the people of Ironhold celebrated their miraculous salvation, darker currents were stirring in the hearts of some men. Currents that would soon test whether bonds of honor and gratitude could survive the oldest of human weaknesses. 3 months had passed since the dragon saved Ironhold, and the settlement had become the most prosperous and secure in all the northern lands. Word of the Dragon Alliance had spread far and wide, bringing traders, diplomats, and curious visitors from across the known world. The great emerald dragon, whom Arvold had learned was called Valdris the Ancient, visited regularly, sharing wisdom and strengthening the bonds between their peoples. But prosperity, as Arvold was about to learn, could corrupt even the most honorable hearts. It began with whispered conversations in dark corners, conversations that Arvel was not meant to hear. Some of the clan's warriors, led by his own cousin Thorek, had grown obsessed with the dragon's legendary hordes of gold and precious stones. They spoke of the creatures not as allies and protectors, but as obstacles standing between them and unimaginable wealth. Think of it. Thorek argued to his conspirators one night, unaware that Arvel was listening from the shadows outside the storage house where they met. One dragon's horde could make us the richest clan in all the Northlands. We'd never want for anything again. But they trust us, protested Ulf, one of the younger warriors. They've shown us nothing but friendship and protection. Dragons are creatures of legend and magic. Thorek replied dismissively. They don't think like us. What is friendship to beings that live for centuries? We're nothing more than momentary curiosities to them. Arvel felt his blood turn to ice as he listened to the plot unfold. Thorek had discovered the location of Valdris's lair, a hidden cave system in the high mountains, and planned to attack during the dragon's next period of deep sleep, when their kind were most vulnerable. The others will never agree to this, Ulf said uncertainly. The others don't need to know, Thorek replied. We take a small group, strike quickly, and return with enough wealth to buy the silence of anyone who might object. By the time they realize what we've done, we'll be too powerful to challenge. The betrayal cut Arvel deeper than any blade. These were men he had fought beside, men he had called brothers. That they could even contemplate such treachery after everything the dragons had done for them revealed a darkness in the human heart that he had never wanted to acknowledge. But Arvel was too late to stop what was already in motion. While he spent precious hours trying to decide how to warn Valdris without breaking the bonds of clan loyalty, Thorek and his conspirators struck. The next morning brought news that would haunt Ironhold forever. Runners arrived with word that Valdris the Ancient had been found dead in his mountain lair, struck down while in a vulnerable state of dragon sleep. The great creature's hoard had been plundered, and the thieves had vanished without a trace. But dragons, Arvel realized with growing horror, do not die quietly. Valdris appeared to him that very night, not in physical form but as a spirit. Translucent and terrible, his golden eyes now burning with the cold fire of betrayal and righteous anger. The great dragon's mental voice, once warm with friendship, now carried the chill of the deepest winter. You knew, Valdris said, and it was not a question. You heard them planning my death. Yet you did nothing to prevent it. I didn't know how, Arvel stammered, the weight of his failure crushing down upon him. They are my kinsmen. I thought I could find another way. Kinsmen who murder sleeping guests and steal what was never theirs, Valdris replied, his spirit form rippling with barely contained fury. You spoke to me once of honor. Young warrior, where was your honor when it was needed most? Arvel fell to his knees, unable to bear the accusation in those ghostly golden eyes. Forgive me, old friend. I have failed you in the worst possible way. Forgiveness is no longer mine to give, Valdris said, his voice heavy with finality. The laws that govern my kind are ancient and absolute. A life debt betrayed becomes a life debt claimed. But you, Arvel of Ironhold, show me mercy when I needed it most. For that reason, I offer you a choice. The dragon's spirit moved closer, and Arvel could feel the supernatural cold radiating from its form. I could curse your entire clan, condemn every man, woman, and child in Ironhold to suffer for the crimes of a few. Or I could curse only you, the one who knew the betrayal and failed to prevent it. Choose quickly, for my time in this realm grows short. The choice was no choice at all. Arvel raised his head and met the dragon's burning gaze without flinching. Curse me alone, he said firmly. The innocent should not suffer for the sins of the guilty. So be it, Valdris replied, and there was a note of what might have been approval in his spectral voice. Arvel of Ironhold, hear your doom. You will live to see all that you hold dear turn to ash and sorrow. Your strength will fail you when it is needed most. Your wisdom will be ignored when it could save lives. And your honor will be questioned by those who know nothing of true sacrifice. You will die alone and forgotten, and even the gods will turn their faces from your passing. The curse settled around Arvel like a mantle of lead, weighing down his spirit with the certainty of inevitable doom. But as Valdres' spirit began to fade, the ancient dragon spoke one final time. But know this, dragon friend, curses like mercy can create bonds that transcend death itself. What begins in betrayal may yet end in redemption, though the price will be higher than any mortal should be asked to pay. With those words, Valdres vanished, leaving Arvold alone with the terrible knowledge of what was to come. The curse began to manifest almost immediately. Thorek and his conspirators returned to Ironhold laden with gold and jewels, and when Arvold accused them of murder and betrayal, the clan chose to believe their lies over his truth. The wealth they had stolen bought them influence and power, while Arvold found himself increasingly isolated and distrusted. Over the following years, every word of Valdres' curse came to pass. Ironhold fell into decline as greed and corruption took root in its heart. The Dragon Alliance was broken forever, leaving the settlement vulnerable to new enemies. Arvold's warnings were ignored, his counsel rejected, and his once great reputation crumbled to dust. In the end, he died as Valdres had foretold, alone and forgotten, his body found days later in the same stone circle where he had once shown mercy to a wounded dragon. But in his final moments, Arvold understood something that the curse itself had not revealed. Redemption was not about avoiding doom, but about facing it with dignity intact. The dragons never forgot Valdres the Ancient, and they never forgave his murder. Ironhold was eventually abandoned, its people scattered to winds, its great hall reduced to ruins overgrown with thorns and shadow. But in the tales told by traveling skalds, one story endured, the story of Arvold the Dragon Friend, who showed mercy when it mattered most and paid the ultimate price for his kinsman's betrayal. And sometimes on foggy nights when the northern winds blow cold and strange, travelers claim to see two ghostly figures in the ruins of old Ironhold, a warrior and a dragon, walking together through mist, their ancient bond finally free from the weight of curses and the corruption of mortal failings. For mercy freely given creates bonds that transcend even death itself, and some friendships are strong enough to survive betrayal, time, and the darkest magic of all, the evil that men do when they forget what honor truly means.